So first of all, go to my website, go to the link, and download the pattern. So there's a pattern for a piece here with long arms and legs, a little bit of a smile in there. This can be adjusted to whatever mask you would like to use. Gives you instructions here, using it with a pleated mask, and here with more of an Olsen type or my mask for the glasses with the extra nose piece. So make sure when you print it that you don't fit it to the page. Make sure you print it at 100%. And then after it's printed, if you take a ruler and measure, these squares should be exactly 1 inch. If you don't have a printer and you draw 1-inch squares on a piece of paper, you can pretty well follow how this shape sits in those squares. That's kind of an artist's proportioning trick, so that you can, see, okay, this line crosses here on that square and there on that square, and then fashion up pretty well the same pattern your own way. So take a nice sharp X-Acto knife and cut out your pattern. I cut it out of a cardstock, so I've printed this on a simple 8.5 by 11 cardstock, which isn't necessary, but I find tracing around cardstock is easier than tracing around paper. Whatever you have around, if you print it on paper, you could actually transfer that to like a cereal box cardboard and then use that as a trace around. This is just simple cover 8.5 by 11 stock, so it actually cuts quite well in one swipe. So follow around, watch your fingers, you don't want any extra issues. You'll notice my green cutting mat that is self-healing, which means that you can cut on it and there are no real indents. It's worth, if you're ever doing a lot of cutting, sewing, getting a nice large cutting mat is awesome. Now this part in the middle, this face, doesn't necessarily have to be a face. It should have as much open space as possible. And have some type of a framework so that the fabric will not go through. I had tried just a large oval, however, that allowed the fabric to go through. You want to have some originality, you could probably change the shape if you like. So there's the frame, and there's the instructions. Now, you can use HDPE, which is like bleach bottle. Cut the label off, clean it, cut the flattest part. Vinegar bottles are also HDPE. They are bendable. The nicest flat part is in there. So you can use them. I'm going to try even these. They are a little softer, so let's check back in a bit. After you've gone around your entire shape with a marker, like a Sharpie that's permanent, then you can cut out your frame. The outside edge are long curved lines, so they are easier to cut with scissors. Now the vinegar bottle, HDPE, is thicker than the bleach bottle. So you'll probably get a preference once you try it. Try to keep it a nice smooth curve so there's not any weird little things that will stick out and poke your face. So I don't find the edges sharp at all, but if you want extra assurance that they're not sharp, you could sand the edges with a bit of sandpaper. Now the shape that I designed has some purpose in the way that the legs tend to be outward, and the face is actually just an area for the air to get through the fabric. So, you know, if you want to make a different shape, that's fine. The hardest part is cutting these out. So you can use an X-Acto knife. It's just going to take a few cuts through. So follow around, keep your fingers away. You can also use a hot knife. A hot knife is like a soldering iron with a knife on the front. Depending on your model, it can get very hot. It does still not tend to go through like butter. It does go easier, so that's another option to cut out your inside shapes. So this goes up to quite a high temperature. Has an X-Acto knife on the front. Do not touch anywhere over here. It's super hot. So it's a little bit of getting used to, because you tend to want to hold, you know, your X-Acto knife further near the front. And I'm using a tile because I do not want to melt my cutting mat. You can also fashion an X-Acto knife into the front of a soldering iron, I believe. So I've made the same shape with the PET pop bottle. Cut it with scissors on the outside. I'm using the hot knife for the face frame. It does cut easier. It tends still to curl up though. And it tends to not like to keep the line. Okay. There you have that one. Now it does want to curl this way, so if you force it to curl the other way, it may also work. So here I have a few masks. This one is a hand sewn pleated version. It has a double layer to put in a filter pocket. To put in a filter, so it has a filter pocket, t-shirt string. So these are great. It's just they always collapse and suction up to the nose. So to make this frame work in here, push it into the center, kind of below where the nose is, and see how far you want it to be tight. So on each side, cut off the same amount. You're gonna snug it into two of the pleats, kind of pushing together. So cut little bits first. You can cut the corners off as well, because that way it'll not be as pokey. So in that side, it should force the mask quite tight out the front. So that looks pretty good. You can slide it up. It has a bit of a curve on the sides. These arms will point inward to make that shape. That might just be a little too long, so I'm just going to cut off. Make sure that I'm centered. Oh, one side was a little longer. So the nice thing about the HDPE is it's pretty malleable, meaning you can flatten it, strengthen it, but it has some stability. So let's see how this fits now. That's pretty good. So I sewed a line because the way the pocket was made didn't allow it to catch into that fold. So a couple little cuts. Cut less first, because you can't add. So because I'm forcing the arm and leg inward, it'll stick into those channels. Okay. Looks like those are a little long still, so another little bit off, 1/8 of an inch or so. You want it to be tight so that it doesn't slip out while you're wearing it. It's a pressure fit. So there you go. that. You can bend it a little if you like. So now it has stability. So let's try it on my blockhead here. So see how nicely this part does not go into the face, into the lips, into the nose. The bottom is above the chin. It should, if it's nice and tight, be outward from the face, not sitting on the face. So there's the frame into a sewn pleated mask. Here's my famous fitted for glasses mask pattern with the extra nose piece. So I made it as usual, except when I folded this in, I sewed these little channels. You know, leave a bigger space in the middle. It's not really crucial where they are. So let's take this one. Oh, this one has already been sized for another mask. So let's start with a fresh one. Push it into the middle. Kind of see how far. Let's try it. Oop, a little wide when I cut it. I know the face is silly, but the face actually makes you realize which side is up. So there, it bends inward again. This into this channel, this into this channel. So it all depends how wide the mask is. You can push this up a bit, down a bit, depending where the nose is, how much fabric. This is a fairly large mask. The lining is kind of a loose cotton, so it would have tended to suck up onto the face. So there it is. Look how nice and stable that is. With the blockhead here, there we go. Will not suck up to the face. There's still lots of air allowed to go through all the spaces and holes. So maybe use some pony beads as toggles for the ties. So that's on an Olsen style mask. You know, adjusting the length of the legs and the arms will allow the mask, the frame, to kind of go up or down a little. So this one here is your typical disposable type of frame, type of mask. Frame, mask, also confusing. So if you force it into the middle, now these tend to be smaller masks. You see that I need to adjust it, take off a little, so I'm going to take that much to start here. So the key is that there's the two folds. Yep. That's the puppy wanting attention. Okay, still too long. I'd rather not cut too much at the beginning. This fabric is very snag. Like, Okay, so there it is in the top. It's in those pleats, those top pleats. Now once it's in the bottom pleats, it's going to bow outward. So let's cut this much. Bottom pleat and the other bottom pleat. So the more you force it, the tighter outward it will bow. So you can, like I said, always you can cut off. That's the nice thing about this plastic, it's kind of forgiving. So look at that. A little bit of adjusting. Once it's adjusted for the mask, you can use it over and over. Wash it, clean it. Don't boil it. So there you go. Look how nicely that bows outward. It has this shape. These are forced inward, so they're going to stay inside these pleats. Oh, here's blockhead. Nose fit. Cross. Nice. Lots of breathing room, breathing space. If you don't have a mask that already has channels, then you can add a piece of fabric. You know, don't sew it over the casing. Sew it wherever you can find a spot to make two channels. So let's take this off. So test it. I don't want the top of the frame poking into my nose. I want it outward and below. Now, the less stuff close to you on your nose, the better. So that's pretty tight in there. I could possibly take off a bit more. So let's try this. And this. Push it outward. Oh, yes, this needs a bit more off. Not bad. Just gonna adjust it a tiny bit. Now the bottle, the bleach bottle, HDPE doesn't react to bleach, so you can probably use bleach if you want to clean your frame. Disinfectant wipe. Follow good hygiene. The tendency of this shape, especially with the tying of the mask, is to bow outward, right? Because this is pulling it in, that's going to bow outward. So you have a little bit of evidence that there's a frame in there, but not bad. So there's blockhead with that frame. Nice, see there? Under the nose, nice fitted nose, under the glasses, tight. Check out the other patterns and videos I have. So there you have the DIY face mask support frame that I've designed. Please do not copy or distribute the pattern. Use for your own use. Thank you. So I've done the same thing as I did with the other bottles with the pop bottle. Now this is actually the curve of the pop bottle, so I'm kind of surprised that it worked as well. You know, it has some good staying stability power. Just make sure you, again, cut it to the right lengths. So I think that would also work. I do wonder, well, the sharpness of the edge of the PET maybe could use a little bit of a sanding. So there gives you a few options. No cost frames for your face masks.